do expect more.
Realistically, and I've alluded to it on the Stadium Monday Night Chat, that we have to accept that the big publishers, your Take Two's, your Activisions, your EAs, are don't get out of bed
Mm-hmm.
for cheap price.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And it
Yep.
just unless something's going to make X million pounds straight off the bat, then why I can't be bothered. Do you know what I mean? And
Yep.
so there, and plus you factor in, with when it comes to new tech IP and new technology, you find that and I know this from working in the TV industry, when new technology comes along and you say, okay, we need to acquire the rights for this. We want to exploit the new rights on this new technology or whatever, like streaming or whatever. Initially, the larger corporations, the larger companies, the larger IP owners are much more conservative and cautious
Yep.
because they don't want to. They want to see where things are going.
Yeah.
And they can afford to wait because they can't be bothered to get out of bed for less than X amount of money. So they're fine. They go, no, well, we'll say, well, we can't afford to pay that, or you need to bring it. No, well, forget it then. We're not that bothered. We'll wait and see where you're going. Whereas for the smaller indies, I've found, and this is the same in the TV industry, that people are much more keener. The smaller you are, the sort of slightly more freer up, the willing to take a risk that you are, and to try a new platform and to try it. And I think that's what we're going to see. I think that the EAs and the Take Twos, they took their money in that first year and sort of delivered their commitments. But now they're not getting in advance. It's like, well, we'll wait and see. We'll see when you go to Mexico. We'll see whether you go to
Exactly.
Turkey and all that kind of stuff, and where you expand and how you market and how your player base. So, and then I actually said on Monday that, because somebody said, where are all these AAA games for this year? Then when you actually look at what people consider to be the AAA games this year, okay, and so that means they have to be multi-platform.
Yep.
So that narrows down the field. Obviously, any Ubisoft game is coming to Stadia, so you can take those all out of that equation. And what you're left with is a handful of games that aren't Ubisoft games and that are multi-platform games. And of those, Stadia's getting its fair share. And as I said on the Stadia Monday Night Chat, we are more likely to see the AAA games that come from mid-tier publishers, like the Embracer, like Deep Silver. I exactly said this on Monday, like Deep Silver. And then what do we know? A week later, they announced big, AAA banger coming in February from Deep Silver, because I think the market is there for them to get out of bed, because their paycheck to get out of bed is probably slightly less than Take-Two, Epic's, Activision's, EA's. The exception being with EA is that FIFA is such a cash cow that I think it was worth them getting out of bed for that one. I think FIFA makes their money on Stadia in a way that no other game at the moment will do for them to the level that they expect. And that's because of you buy so many in-game content and stuff with FIFA, like gazillions of it. So I think that's why we saw FIFA 23 and not Madden and stuff like that. So and I think as they expand the country base, suddenly that incentive in terms of reaching the get out of bed fee for EAs and the whatever suddenly gets closer. So mid-tier, and there are not that many AAA games from mid-tier publishers. So that's the tricky thing. Like there are, Deep Silver, they brought, Metro Exodus, and as I say, the Saints Rows. We've had like all of the Saints Rows now. Now we're getting, Dead Island 2, and it's coming day and date and all of that. So if you can find AAAs either from Ubisoft or from mid-tier publishers, then there is more likely we might see those on Stadia initially. But then as Stadia expands and the player base grows, then you'll start seeing some more movement from the Uber publishers like the EAs and stuff like that. That's the way I look at it anyway.
Yeah, for sure. Like even for FIFA, it's exactly what you said, Clive, because they put out a legacy edition of FIFA on Nintendo Switch every year, which is
Yeah.
essentially the PS4 or PS3 version, like a last generation version of FIFA. Um, and they do it every year, and they're not going to do it for just for the heck of it.
Mm-hmm.
It's because it makes them money. So
Money.
it makes sense, for FIFA to put FIFA on Stadia. Obviously, Madden didn't sell as well as they hoped, but putting FIFA on there is a sure shot. So hopefully, as a platform grows, the user base grows, FIFA becomes more popular. Madden will return. So we'll
Mm-hmm.
start to see, Mad, PGA
Mm-hmm.
Tour Golf, the NHL games, so all these different sports games is so once we see FIFA, on that, it's a good sign. Seeing FIFA on the system
Yeah.
is a good sign. They're still willing to support it. So, it's just going to take that time for the platform to mature and the games will come. It might not be as fast as some like, but here's the thing that I guess a lot of people forget is you don't only have to play on Stadia, right? Like you
Yeah.
can still
Yeah,
play on
yeah.
other
Yeah,
platforms if
exactly.
you want. You're not a
It's
trader.
okay.
You're
Yeah.
not. Yeah. So
Right, you didn't invest like a lot of money into
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
right.
platform
Like
to
like
get in.
this is
That's the
this isn't
mindset.
you
That's
don't
the
own
mindset
it,
that's
right?
different, isn't it? You know,
Yes.
the
Yeah.
people need to like they're so used to saying, "Well, I spent 500 quid on my console, or
Yeah.
three,
Yeah.
2,000 pounds
Well,
on my
you
gaming
know,
PC." Whereas now it's like, no, like you don't have to make that kind of investment, and that's the thing. So you've
Yep.
got choice, and it's just a new
yeah, it's
concept, I
that
think, for many people.
It
that's
is.
it.
It's
It's
just
that
people
console
gotta.
mentality.
Yeah, they just have to accept the change. When we changed from VHS tapes to DVDs, laser discs, Blu-rays, now streaming, and the same with music,
Mm-hmm.
8 tracks, records, cassettes, CDs, and then it's just gonna take the time for people to accept. That streaming is a viable way, and you're still going to have the age old argument. Well, I actually want to own my games. Well, you don't own them
You
anyways,
don't
but
know.
it's just
Yeah,
It's
trying to
facts.
yeah.
explain that to them is just they don't,
Yes.
they
Well, I
obviously
mean,
are naive. Yeah.
it goes back to what we were saying earlier, like uh, with whatever it was that people felt like that Stadia didn't deliver on launch was
Mhm.
like we're used to the console, so when that
Yeah,
happens to a console, it's
Right.
game over. There's nothing they could
Yeah.
do about it. But
Mm-hmm.
Stadia in the
Yeah.
cloud, like they got time to move, and like you're not waiting for Stadia 2 to hit the shows or anything.
Right. Yeah.
It's just
Exactly. Like
different.
I see a lot of people say, "Oh, they need to upgrade the hardware. They need to upgrade the hardware." Well, no, they need to iron out all the stuff that they're doing
Yes.
now.
No.
The development
Sprungen.
tools,
Yes.
the Stadia Pro revenue sharing,
Ja,
the
han
certification,
dödade texten.
all that stuff needs to be ironed out.
Yes.
Then you can start to think about hardware upgrade because we
Mm-hmm.
know in the era of PS4, PS4 Pro, Xbox One, and Xbox One X, 20% of the sales were for the
Mm.
Pro and
Yes.
80% were the base units because in the grand scheme of things that people just care about in enjoying a game. Specs aren't everything. They're nice. Yes, I, guarantee that. But Stadia is doing what they need to do. Everything that we've talked about here, they've realized, not paying that $10 million for, getting game contracts and stuff like that. And people argue, well, Google's got billions of dollars. It doesn't matter. They're not going to keep pumping in something.
Yeah.
They're thinking ahead, right?
Yeah.
They're thinking ahead as how can we streamline the process that's both
Yes.
positive for ourselves and developers. They're getting everything, like I said, all their ducks in a row. And then, we got expansion into other territories and stuff like that. We'll see the hardware upgrade. Maybe, I don't know. It's hard to say.
Whenever,
It
yeah,
could be,
when it makes sense.
yeah. Like maybe another year and a half, 2 years.
Mhm.
I know some people don't like to hear that, but you know what? PlayStation 4 and Xbox One is still selling like hotcakes. The
They still
games,
exactly.
yeah,
There's like
all the
nearly 200
developers are, yeah,
200
they're
million
all
people
making
have done
games. Yeah,
Xbox
yeah,
and
Uh-huh.
PS4s, you know.
right, yeah.
So their experience is going to be better than, on Stadia than it currently is. And that's who,
Yeah.
and that's, it's those lapsed gamers, it's casual gaming, it's game people who
Yes.
like are into gaming, not the tech junkies who've got to have the
Right.
fast graphics card. Not to say, there's
Yep.
people who love tech and love what Stadia do as well and have all these things, but they are a minority. The reality is the tech is lives somewhere between your old Xbox One
Yep.
and current top of the range generation of consoles. It lies somewhere between those things, and that is a perfectly acceptable place to exist.
Exactly.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
they can upgrade later in the same way that the consoles would eventually upgrade and become dated, whatever. But of course, we don't have to pay out another 500 quid.
Exactly. We have every
Yeah,
version of Stadia.
Yeah.
We have.
Right,
I
yeah,
just
we
think
have
it's. I think it's just confusing to see people upset about what you guys just mentioned about Stadia is not on par with the Xbox or PlayStation, where we've constantly over the last few, and not everybody's guilty of this, but we've over the last few years have pointed to the evidence that was never their intent. When in the infamous Maj Bakar and Phil Harrison interview with Richard Ledbetter, when Richard asked him, well, what new consoles are coming out next year, Phil said, I have no idea what they're doing next year. This is our demographic, just the way Clive and John explained it. This is our demographic. This is who we're trying to reach. This is where we'll springboard from. I don't know what they're doing with the PlayStation 5. And apparently there's data that justified what they said justified the demographic that they picked because one, you see that the platform is still growing.
Nei, jeg tror alt er åpent fortsatt. Det er noe av de har forandret litt på bare. Sånn at noen BlackRock Depth eller hva da?
Alle questene vi har gjort før, det alt borte?
Nja, ikke helt sikker.
Nei, jeg ser ganske mange av de mappene ikke stengt da, I hvert fall. Så...
It's impressive, and Stadia is always of the platforms at the top of that list when they talk about it. So it is a real live thing that I get it. Some of the most hardcore may say things like, yeah, we got to upgrade that tech. We got to upgrade that tech. But to like John's point, when it came to the Pro One X, why? Because developers were making more money on PlayStation. That's where they felt like their bread and butter was, and they didn't want to upset Sony. So they didn't tap into the Xbox One X. The first developer that really tapped into it was Rockstar with Red Dead Redemption because they do their own thing. So it makes no sense right now as a 1% business when you're still trying to iron out just the basics to upgrade your hardware. Because if no one taps into it, that already deflates the power of it by word of mouth. Oh, well, they upgraded their hardware and it's still not 150,000 frames per second.
Right.
Yeah. So it's just a matter of, again, being patient, understanding what the platform is and what it isn't, and seeing if it fit into your portfolio. Like both of these gentlemen said, you don't have to just game on Stadia. If the best graphics or every single game is a...
Hva sa du?
Kan man gjøre noe med achievement points, eller det bare sånn?
Nei, det blir liksom sånn på Xbox, tror jeg. Jeg har så mye.
Hvor mange har du?
Jeg er ikke sikker. Jeg er ikke sikker.
Herregud, beklager. Har du prøvd Journey to the Savage Planet?
Jeg testet det på Stala, jeg synes det er ganske kult. Jeg spilte litt i Coop, men han Ari som jeg spilte med, han gadd ikke spille mer.
Skal jeg prøve nå, ja? Synes det høres morsomt ut.
Ja, det er ganske kult.
Er det som survival?
Nei, du låser opp litt forskjellige ting utifra når du spiller videre.